Well, Mark Carney and the Liberal Party have introduced new rules around their budget. Apparently, they're promising November 4th budget is actually coming. And then they threw a curveball to be like, whoa, actually, just a heads up, we're also doing a little this, and this. So we'll be talking about what all of those things are. And secondly, Danielle Smith had some time with Ezra Levant on Rebel News. And, didn't really invoke a whole lot of confidence that Alberta will stay in Canada. She's hoping so, hoping it will happen, but there's just some behavior that's happening that it's beyond her control, that she's like, oh boy, I don't like how this is going, and I don't like how any of it's looking, but here we are. Alas, this is the show of the hour. Welcome to the Elevate Podcast. I'm your host, Josh. If you're getting value from today's episode, take the time to like, share, and subscribe. It helps us to grow. It helps us to get to new audiences and helps people see that there's something different than what the mainstream media has to offer. And now, let's get into our first story, shall we? Well, before we do that, we had the likes of Gator Gum try to, fact check us today, which was fascinating. And this is something I find very interesting, right? It's always fun when people who don't put their actual face to an actual name on social media, who like to go and fact check everybody and try to act as if they're holier than thou, is always funny to witness and watch. And so they just tried to do that to me today. They didn't like me having a quip about taking off the Blue Jays jersey, taking off the Blue Jays cap, not being called outright fascist. Really upset by that. So said this instead to try and correct and try to get one on me, and says, maybe it isn't the bald cap. Maybe it's the spreading of debunked misinformation and inventing hyperbolic hypotheticals that people think is discrediting, ? Oh, really? Oh, really? So obviously, Gator Gum took aim at, me retweeting Mark Nixon's post about the anti-meme law down in Mexico. And well, there were some differences about that story that isn't exactly represented in this post. However, my post, there wasn't really anything unfactual about it. I just said, this is exactly the type of thing they are targeting here in Canada. We must remind them that they'll never win that battle by all means possible. That was all I said, having some fun with it, all that is. But it's true. Canada is looking to bring laws like that to Canada. It's not really a false claim, actually. We're seeing it in our laws being introduced day by day. Hyperbolic, hypotheticals. Oh, really? Yeah. Pretty sure a bunch of Canadians got their bank accounts frozen. Pretty sure we in Canada have gotten news wiped off of platforms in this country due to liberal policies that private industry have had to react to. That's happening. We're seeing actually a curating of online information due to liberal policies. So I'm trying to figure out what the lie is there. Waiting to see. I'll be waiting to hear. I'm not really expecting a whole lot from someone who can't put a name beside their face on social media as they make insane claims. However, these are the people that are on social media on the left who claim that they are better than you, holier than thou, and think they're intellectually honest. Well, the thing is, I am actually intellectually honest, and when I mess something up, I will actually own it, and I'll do so right now. I go back to my episode from this morning about Bill C-8, Bill C-9, and Bill C-63 being raised from the dead, this, that, the other, and how this is the monstrosity that the Liberals are creating to be able to control and manipulate the online world here in Canada. And I introduced the bill that was being brought forward in Mexico. We talked about, read it over, we did it together. We did the translation, this, that, the other. However, it wasn't the president of Mexico who brought it forward. It was actually what would be equivalent in Canada be the private member's bill. It was a bill brought forward just by one member of the political governing party who brought it forward saying this is a great idea. However, Sheinbaum has expressed concern about AI and wanting to curb it and figure this out and police it. She has been on record saying that. However, she didn't bring forward this anti-meme law. Then I'll clarify on that. It's true. I made it sound like and I literally said that it came from her. That was untrue. It came from a member of the governing party, and it came from one person, and it's kind of staying where it is for now. However, we'll apply the liberal logic. If someone in your party is bringing forward a private member's bill like that, it's interesting, isn't it? What's being talked about in that party? We'll leave it at that. We will leave it at that. However, that's a slight correction I want to make to that story. Everything else, 100% on the money is true. Now let's get into our first story, shall we? As I said, there was a lot of back and forth on Bill C-8 on Friday as it was in its second reading of debate. And Kevin Lamoureux got up in the House of Commons saying, everything you're saying about this bill is fake news. These are just conspiracy theories, virtually almost word for word verbatim what we saw from Gator Gum there. Hyperbolic hypotheticals is all you guys got. Kevin Lamoureux actually said that almost word for word in the House of Commons, and well, here's what he had to say.
The member opposite tries to say you have government, the Liberal Party We're going to take away your internet. We're going to take away your cell phones. We're going to deny you the opportunity to do your banking. And they come up with this whole conspiracy wearing well, not necessarily wearing a tin hat, but this conspiracy theory, how big government's going to take everything away when the legislation is all about protecting Canadians, protecting the economy. Does the member see any merit in having cybersecurity legislation that would ensure that the interests of Canadians is being served, such as our economy, economic transitions that take place every day by the thousands? Does he not see the merit for protecting that?
The honourable member for Kitchener South Hespeler.
This part's
Mr.
awesome.
Speaker, I wish this was a conspiracy. I wish the Liberals had the shame to keep this secret. It's open. It's in the bill. Multiple civil society groups have written letters to them asking them to change this, sounding the alarm. And when he says he thinks that I think it's a conspiracy that they might freeze bank accounts, they already did that, and the federal court told them that was a violation of charter rights, and they have no response to that. I'm asking them, apologize. If you're like, stand up, you have a lot to say. Now would be a terrific time to apologize for violating our charter rights in the last parliament. I'm serious. I don't know why you're laughing. Excuse me, Mr. Speaker.
But spot on. That happened in the last parliament. And it was deemed unconstitutional. It was against the law what they've done. No apologies. No nothing. Oh, we had to do it. We had to do it. Just kind of like how we need to have Bill C-8. And the fact you guys are bringing up issues about it, you guys are conspiracy theorists. You're not quite tinfoil hat, but you're almost there. We are just witnessing your behavior over the past 10 years. How it's grown to be more and more authoritarian over the years. And we're the bad people for bringing it up. We're the ones that are bringing up hyperbolic hypotheticals. I wish that were true. I wish I was just spewing hot air for the sake of clicks. However, I've witnessed it time and time and time again with this government. Said it here, you froze bank accounts. You've cleansed the internet of news on specific channels because they didn't play ball with you. And again, just to make sure that I'm intellectually honest on this. Yes, it was liberal policy that was brought forward that forced the hand of private industry to scrape news stories off of their platform. You can say that's the private industry all you want. It wouldn't have happened if legislation wasn't there in the first place. But But we're the crazy ones over here. We have the likes of Mark Carney, who has north of 550 conflicts of interest of financials, and there's nothing we can do about it. He continues to find the loopholes, skirt around the rules, and be able to enrich himself in the process. We are literally witnessing that. Companies he's connected to by some means or another are getting enriched off of his specific policies he's bringing when it comes to economic policy. We're watching this clear as day. And to say that we're lying and that we're just, out to lunch, well, that's the gaslighting the left will always give you, because the left doesn't like to work in reality. They don't like to work in facts because, well, their arguments don't hold up to them, unfortunately. But what they are craving is power, and power over the population. And they'll continue to bring in bills to do so. And when you bring up the issues of the bills, you're crazy. You're crazy. You are psychotic. And the reason why I want to start off with kind of like a hint back towards this morning's episode is because, well, we have the likes of the federal government saying they're going to release budgets in the fall instead of the spring. We have our finance minister, François-Philippe Champagne, released a video today talking about just that.
Is presenting a budget on November 4th.
The Mark Carney government will open its books to Canadians
on November 4th.
We're going to present a great budget in this House on the 4th of November, Mr. Speaker.
The world is changing. Trade disruptions are no longer the exception, but the rule. Partners we once relied on are changing the way they do trade. Put simply, these are not normal times. As a country, we must pivot to make Canada strong, and we are. Just as CDR led the Canadian economy in 1945, with generational investments in railways and ports and energy, all things capital cite bigger and bigger over time.
So this is essentially what the big announcement was. Yeah, we're going to shift some things around the budget. We are now going to present a budget in the fall from now on, and we are going to do a fiscal update in the spring. Whereas before it was the opposite, where it was a budget in the spring, fiscal update in the fall. And again, you heard the argument there. It was around like, well, it just makes more sense when it comes to private industry. We actually align more with the business calendar so that it all just kind of makes sense and everything kind of works more seamless together. You know, that's kind of why the decision we made that, which on its face is pretty sound. It's sound reasoning of like, okay, yeah, I see where you're coming from with that. I get it. However, let's talk about the history of this government, what they've been doing, how the fact we haven't had a budget in a year and a half now. Odd timing to just like, yeah, we're just going to switch it up. We have not done this. We only did this one other time. I think in 2001, Paul Martin did this. We saw how that ended. So like, what's the thought process here? What's the plan? What are we doing here? You've been pushing off the budget for a while now, and we're finally going to get it in November. And now the announcement comes that we're going to get a flip and when the budget's going to come now. Which is crazy because what it's allowing you to do is we're already halfway through the fiscal year at this point, and we're only getting the budget for the year now, which means you'd actually have to get yourself, release this budget, get yourself geared up to actually release a proper budget in April 4th the following year. They don't want to do that. So yes, we'll still get like a fiscal update as a part of this budget. So we'll get an idea of what's happened over the past year and a half or so. But essentially what they're doing by shifting this around is now just being like, okay, instead of having to just do a fiscal update in October, then wait till like April to release a budget, it's now, we're just going to flip it now, just get a restart now, get a budget out, fiscal update, and we move forward. It feels a bit clunky. Not a huge fan of how this is going, but we'll see what happens. And what we're starting to see are the capital investments and the operational expenses. This is a huge talking point of this Carney government, is we're going to spend less, invest more, spend less, invest more. Big slogan of theirs, right? However, we're kind of wondering what's going to happen because we've been told by the PBO, the Parliament Budgetary Officer, that they're restructuring how they do the budget typically now. It's changing how they do information. It's kind of like, it's being done in a way where it's not as easily accountable, was I believe what was being said and alluded to in some of his interviews with CTV and CBC. And so they're trying their best to kind of be on top of it, but that's what's happening. So when you're kind of obfuscating your budget and how you're going to present your budget, which is being told by the PBO, then you come in, you're going to like, we're going to shift to when we're going to release our budgets from here on out. And it's going to be the exact opposite than what we've been doing as a country for a long time. But don't worry, it's because Mark Carney's the economic expert here. It's okay. And we're starting to see this happen. And alarm was raised on this a handful of months ago. And seeing this again, you're just like, yeah, this is likely what's going to be happening, especially when you hear the PBO raising the alarm on it. Is a dirty trick that happens in finance, especially when it comes to the finances of a specific business, is in order to give a different financial picture than what is currently existing, they will kind of shift some line items around in order to present a different scenery of what's currently going on. For example, they'll have their operational expenses, which, are expenses that are your day-to-day, right? You got your rent, you have your salaries, you got the tools you have to use to get the work done. Those are operational expenses, right? Capital investments are like you're investing, you're putting money into machines that you're expecting to help you make money in the future, that type of thing, right? Those are what we would call capital investments. However, what some businesses have done in the past is they kind of start categorizing specific line items that would typically go under operational expenses and put it in the capital investments to make it look like, wow, look how much profit we're making. Look how much we're investing in the company. Our operational expenses are super low. What we're investing for the future is super high. It's to give a specific financial picture that may or may not be true. And considering the PBO has been raising the alarm on how they're presenting the budget, it's different than anyone's ever done it before. It's a little bit harder to follow. And we're already hearing that they're starting to categorize things in a questionable way. Makes you wonder how this is really going to all go. November 4th, big budget day. We'll see how that actually happens and see what comes forward. And let's see how they use these two categories to show what our budget and our deficit is really saying. We'll be keeping a close eye on it. However, we move on. Danielle Smith hopping on with Ezra Levant on Rebel News to discuss what's happening with Alberta and their desire to to separate, as well as her trying to get deals done to help encourage Albertans to want to remain a part of the Confederation. And this was a fascinating conversation, and, hear her out of what the conversations are like with Carney and how, well, it's just not going the way she'd hoped they were going to be going.
I remember Preston Manning wrote an op-ed, I think it was in the Globe and Mail before the election, saying if Mark Carney won, he could be the very last prime minister of United Canada. I was sort of shocked by that, but I think Manning was implying that Mark Carney, because of his views on energy, his lifetime's work has been carbon taxes and net zero and stuff like that. Preston Manning was suggesting that if Mark Carney were to be the prime minister, that would end Canada. It would be such an attack on Alberta that Alberta would leave. And I know that the referendum legislation in Alberta now has a lower threshold. Are you worried that if Mark Carney holds the line against Alberta, and if this Team Canada Expand Markets thing was just puffery, are you worried that he's going to give winning conditions? Some people would say it's not a worry at all, it's a delight. But do you predict that that would give a boost to the separatist movement?
Well, I can tell you that there already is a petition campaign that's been put forward by the former Deputy Premier, Thomas Lukasik. And it's written the other way. It's, do you want to remain in Canada? He is operating under the old rules, had to get about 290,000 signatures in 3 months. And it sounds to me by recent news stories that he's almost there. And so that is a referendum on separation, because the question is, are you going to remain in Canada or do you want to leave Canada? That's the implications of that. It's the same question that was asked in the Brexit referendum. And look what happened there. So I've been trying to do everything I can to make people, the status quo is not having enough signatures for a petition campaign like that. But it does look like it is heading in that direction. And when it does come right down to it, we'd be looking at, probably, if the signatures are collected and verified, we'd be looking at having something in the spring. So there is a very narrow window here for the Prime Minister, I think, to take the error out of that side of the vote. But so far, with what'd you say, 204 days, we've seen very, very little progress on any of the issues we've raised.
The sentiment around separation is increasing. Another petition going through, to hit the threshold of getting a referendum going of the question, do you want to remain as a part of Canada? And she lays it down there, where this sentiment is growing and it's getting higher and higher over every month when something is not getting done, when no deals getting done with Trump, no deals being done with the canola tariffs and all that BS that's going on. And then as well, nothing being done in terms of pipelines in the country. When he claimed to be the guy who's here for a crisis and the guy who's going to solve everything, and there's no pipelines being brought forward or even so much as entertained, that separation sentiment is going to continue growing. And you heard Danielle Smith say here, if Mark Carney wants to take this wind out of the sails of the separation sentiment, he would get things going in terms of energy in Alberta. He would lift these laws, get things going, get private investment investing into Canada, and it would be all good. However, he doesn't seem to want to be doing that. What could this mean for this country of Canada? And I just wanted to kind of show this clip and kind of discuss this a little bit, because that is a concern. This is where we're at. Even Danielle Smith's like, I want to be a part of a unified Canada, but we just have autonomy over ourselves. But the sentiment is growing. So is Mark Carney going to call the bluff of Alberta? Or is he going to try and quell the tensions and give them the projects that they so desire to be able to get their province going? But anyways, enjoy your day. Have yourselves a good one. I'm out.